But
Okay.
I want to ask you as well, before we get into questions, if if you have a piece that resonates with the spirit of this festival or reminds you of Margaret Walker, any piece that you would like to share with the audience that's watching that you'd like to read?
Well, the audience wasn't listening to what I was saying, were they?
Oh, no, we just started recording just now.
Right,
No,
yeah.
they don't know about Miss Vertigo.
Oh, okay, thank you. No, that's just between us, right? I was going to begin, my dear sister, with a piece that I did for Miss Margaret when she came to New York. It was a women's conference, right? And they asked me to do a piece for her, so I'd like to read it. And I'm hoping I have the right glasses on. From a Black feminist conference, Reflections on Margaret Walker, poet. Chicago, October 1977, Saturday afternoon. Margaret Walker walks her red clay Mississippi walk into a room of feminists, a strong gust of a woman, raining warm honeysuckle kisses and smiles, and I fold myself into her and hear a primordial Black song sailing down the Guinea coast. Her face, ordained with lines, confesses, poems, hallelujahs, choruses. She turns, leans her crane-like neck on the edge of the world, emphasizing us in this hotel village room, heavy with women. Our names become known to us. There is an echo about her of Black people rhyming, of a woman celebrating herself and a people. Words ripen on her mouth like pomegranates. This pecan-colored woman, short-limbed with lightning, and I swallow her whole as she pulls herself up from youth, shaking off those early Chicago years where she and Wright and others turned a Chicago desert into a wellspring of words. Eyes, brilliant, solution eyes, eyes, brilliant, solution eyes, torpedoing the room with sun, eyes dressed like a woman, seeing through riddles, offering asylum from ghosts. She stands over generations. She stands over generations and centuries as she talks, hands on her waist, a feminine memory, washed up from another shore. She opens her coat, a light-colored blouse. I'm going to start this whole thing over again, okay?
That's perfect.
Okay, let me start it over again, right? Mm-hmm. Let's see if these other glasses are better. No, I need some new glasses, and the others broke on me, so I've been using some old glasses because I tried to get an appointment to get my eyes examined, and people said I couldn't do that until next week. They wouldn't have no space for me until next week, so that's why if you see me holding this thing up closer and closer to my face, it's because of these are not really my new glasses, but my glasses. I want to begin with a piece that I did for a major conference in New York, where Sister Margaret Walker was invited to lead this conference, this talk to women. From a Black feminist conference, Reflections on Margaret Walker, poet. Chicago, October 1977, Saturday afternoon. Margaret Walker walks her red clay Mississippi walk into a room of feminists, a strong gust of a woman, raining warm honeysuckle kisses and smiles, and I fold myself into her and hear a primordial Black song sailing down the Guinea coast. Her face, ordained with lines, confesses poems, hallelujahs, choruses. She turns, leans her crane-like neck on the edge of the world, emphasizing us in this hotel village room, heavy with women. Our names become known to us. There is an echo about her of Black people, rhyming of a woman celebrating herself and a people. Words ripen on her mouth like pomegranates. This pecan color woman, short limbed with lightning, and I swallow her whole as she pulls herself up from youth, shaking off those early Chicago years where she and Wright and others turned a Chicago desert into a wellspring of words. Eyes, brilliant solution eyes, torpedoing the room with sun, eyes dressed like a woman, singing through riddles, offering asylum from ghosts. She stands over centuries as she talks, hands on her waist, a feminine memory washed up from another shore. She opens her coat, a light-colored blouse, dances against dark breasts, her words carved from ancestral widows, rain children, and the room contracts with color. Her voice turns the afternoon brown, this Black woman poet, removing false veils, baptizes us with syllables, woman words, entering and leaving at will. Let a new earth rise. Let another world be born. Let a bloody peace be written in the sky. Let a second generation full of courage issue forth. Let a people loving freedom come to growth. Let a beauty full of healing and a strength of final clenching be the pulsing in our spirits and our blood. Let the martial songs be written. Let the dirges disappear. Let a race of men now rise and take control. Walking back to my room, I listen to the afternoon, play it again and again, scatter myself over evening walls and passageways wet with her footprints. In my room, I collect papers, breasts, and listen to our mothers humming. And that's the piece I did for Sister Margaret.
Beautiful.
Yes. There's something on the screen says this meeting is being recorded. So it's a big block, so I can't see me at all.
If you toggle to and say got it, it just wants you to acknowledge that you know that you're being recorded, then it should go away.
Yeah, it's still there. I saw the reflection when I was reading, but it says this meeting has been recorded. But
blue button says got it.
There's writing underneath that. And I don't know how to get it off. I could call Marani, I guess, and I can come closer and tell you what it says. It says this account can watch this recording if it's stored in the cloud.
Right.
That's the thing. Then petitions will, with relevant permissions, also may save and share whatever. By staying in this meeting, you consent to be recorded. It says leave meeting, and then it has got it in blue. But I didn't use to push something to get this thing off. It's like it's not off.
If you click got it, so if you got a mouse or a trackpad on your computer there.
I don't know how to do this. Okay, so it should be written on something.
No. So where the cursor is, the little arrow, you know how to move that little arrow around?
No, I don't. I really don't.
We can see you just fine on our end. But if you want to ask Marani to come and just click that off, it's very simple.
Right. Okay.
I press recording again. If you want to jump back into it, we can, and then we can.
So when he comes, can I ask you when he comes, he can just push whatever button needs to be pushed, and it won't interfere with the recording or whatever, will it? Or
No,
That's
it
right.
wasn't clear. We'll be fine. There's the button that says got it. If he just clicks that, it'll go away.
Oh God, well, he knows how to do it. It's not he, it's me. Okay. Got it. Let me see. I don't see it. I see tab, control, option, command. Um
Oh, no. You know, we can keep
command,
going. Whenever he clicks that, it's not going to interrupt anything we're doing. And then you'll be able
command,
to.
option, shift, return, delete. I don't see anything that says got it, by the way. I see it's command, option, control, FN, shift, caps lock, tab.
It's not on the
Here he
keyboard. It's
Here
on
he
your
comes.
screen. It's on the actual screen.
Here he comes. He's coming down the steps. I'm sorry for bothering you. Mhm.
Thank you, Marani.
No problem.
What did you push so I can see it? Oh, that's okay. You can tell me later on. But what there in case it happens again?
Oh.
Okay. Could you stay down for a minute just to make sure it's okay? It's okay. Can you see me? I see you now.
Okay, perfect. You can see us. It shouldn't pop up again because we've
Okay.
already got it recorded.
Okay.
So I'm so grateful that you started with the piece that you wrote for Margaret Walker, because you shared some things with me that I didn't know about your relationship with Margaret Walker and what she has meant to you. So would you mind sharing with us just a little bit about what Margaret Walker has meant to you and why it was so important for you to be here in 73 and what that felt like being in
Right.
Jackson?
We were in New York City for some big, I don't know, poetry reading. It was a big affair, and Baraka and Larry Neal, a bunch of people were there, all these poets. And at the end of the program, a sister came out and she read that poem. And if you can imagine a room full of these young people, right, catching their breaths as she went on and on with the poem, right? And when it was finished, I said out loud, "Who is the poet?" And they said, "Margaret Walker." And I was crying at the end, listening to that poem, right? And so it was just, I mean, that poem for my people is just an amazing piece. It's one of those things that that you listen to, and you at some point, I brought the book down with the poem for my people. Anyway, everybody in the room was crying, because this is how Miss Margaret began that piece. She said, "For my people everywhere, singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, bending their knees humbly to an unseen power." And it went on, "For my people, for my people, for my people." And then she ended up with what I did, "Let a new earth rise up," right? And it was, I mean, the whole audience of all these young people, we had never heard this poem by Margaret Walker, but you know what that's about, not really being taught anything at all in these schools. And so here we were. I had arrived at this poem, and I said, "Gee, I look forward to meeting her." And fast forward maybe a couple of months later, in a place called Detroit, Michigan, Dudley Randall, who had started Broadside Press, right, said, "I have someone I'd like for you to meet, Sister Sonia." And I walked up, it was Margaret Walker. And she she did this. I mean, she was short like me, right? But commanding. I mean, you think she's 6 feet tall, to be frank. You really want to look up, until you realize that, you're seeing eye to eye with her, right, at this point. And she said, "Oh," she said, "you're that little one," she says, "going around here, telling America what she should be doing." No one had ever said that to me. And she said, "So you're the one causing all the trouble, huh?" She said, "Come here." And she gave me this mighty hug. And I haven't been hugged like that since, except when I was in a place called Cuba. I was there and I met the great poet there in Cuba, right? And as I walked into his office, he was not really well, and so they had kind of put him right there. Nicholas Guillen is his name. And he put him in the middle of the floor and he grabbed me and he held me so tight, my dear sister, that I thought I couldn't breathe. And I thought, now I didn't come all the way down here in Cuba, just to die, whatever. And then I realized that if I just leaned into his breath, leaned into his body, right, we would begin to breathe as one. And we did. And Miss Margaret, coming full circle that day, kept hugging me. And she got on stage and she said some words about me, said, this is the one, if you think my poems cause trouble, you should hear what she says also too. So that was our beginning of friendship. And she gave me her number. She said, call me sometimes. If you're down here in Mississippi, call me and let me know. And then she said, I'm going to give you my schedule to let you know where I'll be. And so we began to talk to each other on the phone. And it was such a blessing. And what I have learned from Miss Margaret and all the other poets, Gwendolyn Brooks, right, and Sterling Brown and Dudley Randall, all those poets that were poeting before we were poeting, my dear sister, is that you learn how to open out your arms to young people. You learn how to listen to what they're about, listen to their poetry, help them and say, yes, or you even say gently, you use that word. Why don't you try using this word, in a workshop, whatever, etc. That was the joy. And so we talked on the telephone and she would let me know when she was coming up. And she came up to visit, and I had her up for a reading at Temple University, and she stayed at my house. And she and her husband took over the second floor, right? So I went up to the third floor, right? And all the people came in. Someone reminded me recently, I was someplace in the co-op and said, oh, Miss Sanchez, remember when Margaret Walker, you had her here at Temple University and you had a reception for her? I have all these great pictures taken with her, and she held court in a rocking chair that's right across from the room here, and people just were enthralled by her, this woman, who has so much, who written such a seminal poem for us all to understand, for my people to know these are our people. You cannot discard them. You've got to love them. You have to extend your hands, extend your eyes and your arms and say, we are one. For my people, made us understand that indeed these are our people. Miss Margaret, right? Yeah.
I'm just walking down that memory with you, wishing that I was there, but grateful that you are willing to share that sisterhood that you all built. And it brings me to this festival that she was able to put together in 1973, where she sent letters and picked up the phone. And it seems just like about everyone just stopped what they were doing to come to Mississippi. Can you share any memories that you have of what it felt like to be here where we are in Jackson in 73? What was that feeling like?
Right. That was when I got that letter, right? I remember I used to share with my grad classes and my undergrad classes. I never made them feel as if, so you're undergrads, right? I said, here's this great letter. I said, you know what I'm going to do? You all figure out a kind of a contest of how you want to do it. And the three that you want, they were supposed to write a poem or something, and they were going to be the judges. I was not the judge, okay? But the classroom was going to be the judges, whatever. And what they did is that the three best poems that they thought had been written, I took them with me down to that conference. I paid for their plane tickets. I paid for their rooms. I said, this is history. You're going to be here. Plus, you got to come back and report to our class, our creative writing class. And they couldn't believe that they were actually going to Mississippi. They could not believe that this was happening to them. And they came back and did a report and then read what they had written at the same time. And these were young males, right? And they, I mean, some had tears in their eyes saying what an experience it was. And they just constantly thanked me for it. That's what we do, don't we, my sister? You know, whenever we can do this, whenever we can expose the younger generation, you know, to people who have done, you know, classic work. And this is a classic for my people, is it not? Right, that you expose them to that. They were exposed to all the other poets who would come out there also too, and they took notes and they had to report to the class all the things that they had done, the people they had sat down and listened to. It was a glorious, glorious time for them. And you know, I was someplace in California. One of them was from California, and people came up on stage, and this young man came walking towards me. And I turned around and looked at him, and I thought to myself, he looks familiar. And I said, oh my God, you know, 1973, can you imagine, right? And he said, he came up and just hugged me. He said, you don't know that I still remember that was one of the greatest things that had ever happened to me, going to Jackson, Mississippi, you know, meeting the great poet Margaret Walker and being involved with all those other poets who were there. He said, I still have never forgotten that. So, you know, we do that, do we not? You know, as writers, as teachers, we do that, do we not? To bring them into that arena. This is no place where you say, well, you can't come. It's for all us important people. You bring these people, these young people with you so they can sit and listen and taste that history and taste that history and know, and they could say years later, I was there when that happened. And I was there when I heard Margaret Walker read for my people. I was there when I heard Alice Walker. You know, I was there when all these people, Audre Lorde, when all these people were there, you know, and I saw them talking to each other. And they came every place I went. And so I went to a TV station, and I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that picture? Oh, see, Miss Margaret had that jazzy hat. You see it? Whatever, right? And there is June Jordan. Can you see that? Can you see her?
Yes.
Can you see her?
I can see her, yes.
Okay, June Jordan, Miss Margaret, right? Sanchez, and our dear sister Mari Evans from Indiana, right? There's another poet there that was kind of clipped off, and in all these years I've said to people, do you have the full photo? And no one's had the full photo, so I'm not sure who it was. We were at a TV station there, and Miss Margaret was in one of her big gorgeous hats that she wore, right? And we were on this TV station, you know, talking about indeed this program that we were involved with. Isn't that a great picture? And if you don't have it, I'll have one made and send it to you. It's I have it, you know, on my piano, you know, and every now and then when I'm working in the family room, I look up and just just give her a greeting, say, how you doing, Sister Margaret, right? You know, we're still singing your songs, right? We're still remembering you. We're still knowing at some point that you have been one of the great inspirations for all of us in terms of Black poetry, in terms of poetry in general, you know, in terms of you and the love that you felt for us, for your people, for our people, you know, and most especially for us, the younger generation coming behind you, right? Yeah.
That is, I mean, that's so moving. I've seen that picture. That's one of Roy Lewis's original photos that he took in 73. And we actually I might be able to find the original that has.
Right. See, there's someone right here. You see the shoulder right there. Now, maybe that person was not in there all along. So maybe I've just been wondering, you know, who that was. But every now and then when I look at, I have it, you know, on my piano. And then sometimes when I'm working, I've come and put it on my desk in my study so I can kind of look up at them. But that is Herstred history, you know, starting all the way, you know, from Sister June right there. I wish that you mentioned the photographer. I have called him on many occasions asking him, could I have some pictures from 1973? And he promised me a number of pictures, and I've never gotten them right. But one day, maybe I'll send it. Huh?
We can arrange that. I will get you some
I'd
pictures.
love to. I'd love to have it in my memoir that I'm writing right now. Okay, right. And it's just so important. And any pictures you might have of the family, and our dear sister, I wrote some haiku to her on the case of her death, right? Yeah. So any of those pictures, I like to include those pictures in the memoir, because I think it's so important for people to see the people that you're talking about in a book,
Well, I'm going to say this. I have a picture of you and my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my husband is a little boy, my sister-in-law, and Margaret Walker at dinner.
In a restaurant, right?
Restaurant, yes. So I will send that to you. I will get that.
Someone said that to me, and I said, and I quote, "Would you send me that picture, please?" And then I haven't got this. So you mentioned that. I said, "Oh, isn't that? I'm lucky. Thank you. Would you do that?"
Absolutely. You hold me accountable for it. I will get you that picture.
I'll come down. I'll get in a plane. I haven't been in a plane in 3 years with this pandemic. But I'll get my son to drive me down there, and I'll knock on the door and say, "Okay, here I is." Right?
I might just want that anyway. So, but I promise I will get that to you. I keep that in my office, and so that's something that I look at every day. That picture of you is my family. And I think this is a beautiful segue. I'd love to hear how you talked about being intentional about bringing young people into this space so that they could experience this. And it wasn't something that was siloed just for the artists that people were reading or who had been able to make a career with their talent, but it was for this posterity, for our people, very literally. And so with this 50th celebration, it's been 50 years, if you can believe it. We set out to accomplish a few things. Obviously, we wanted to pay homage to Phillis Wheatley as the foundation that she is for Black women's literary legacy, right? Because she was, we are able to. We wanted to lift and honor Margaret Walker and the courage and the imagination that it must have taken for her to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it by myself, and I'm going to do it in Jackson, Mississippi. We wanted to just celebrate Black women in the sister circles that are necessary for us to produce creative work. And lastly, we wanted to showcase sort of the lineage of Wheatley and Walker, this new vanguard of Black women writing. So we have Angie Thomas and Jesmyn Ward and Imani Perry and Nick Stone, Eve Ewing, Nicole Hannah-Jones, and so many more that we couldn't do what Margaret Walker did, but we wanted to at least do something that demonstrated that these are your blooms, you have seeded these generations. So can you talk maybe about why you believe this 50th celebration, us stopping at this moment to honor and acknowledge what happened in 73, why it's important?
Well, my dear sister, it's important because, sometimes, when you're young, you think that you're the only thing that's happening, right? And the thing that really was so important, I think, was it was important for these people coming in, the younger writers, that we've always supported, that we've taught a number of some of the younger writers who are writing, in workshops, that we've seen them grow, we've seen them, multiply. Whenever that I've had something, I've always invited the younger poets. I've always went on stage with younger poets, right? I remember Baraka and I had a reading, and I said, Baraka, I want to invite one of the poets here in Philadelphia, and then one of the rappers, because there was this long discussion about, is rap really poetry? You know what I mean? Those rappers rapping, is it really poetry? So what I did is that I reached out, to say to one of the brothers and one of the younger brothers, younger sisters, come on. And then the people from the school said, well, Professor Sanchez, we're paying you and Mr. Baraka, we're not paying them. I said, don't worry, we'll settle that between us. And so they came, and we had 4 stools up on stage, right? And Baraka and I were in the middle, and they were on either side of us, and they read, and they had, the place was packed. It was like people were sitting illegally, on the steps, and I kept saying, I hope nobody comes in here and sees this, right? But they were all over the place. They were hanging from the rafters. Seriously. And they was actually had come down. Some were sitting on the stage around us because they wanted to hear this poetry. And these 2 young people had that audience. Can you imagine? They had an audience, whatever, where every time they read a poem, they would people clapped and applauded them, and they understood at some particular point that it was not just about people applauding them, but it was about that interaction between them and that audience, what they were saying. People would say things out loud, well, when you go to see plays, people say like, everyone's quiet. No one says anything until the end where they clap. But if you also go to a play, and perhaps it's a Black play or any play, I remember going to see some plays with Ruby D on Saturdays. We would see a matinee, then we'd go see a play at night, because I was living in Philadelphia, teaching in Philadelphia, and I just missed the theater in New York, right? And so therefore, in the midst of everything, when something dramatic happened, people were just so quiet. And Ruben and I would say, amen. And I would say, hey, woman, right? And people would turn around and look at us. But when we finished, right, and we went backstage, they were waiting for us to do it. We knew. And thank you for doing it, because they said you made us really continue doing, what we should have been doing, because the theater really was the theater, even in old England, people made noise. When someone said something, they said, oh, they made lots. And now people go, don't say anything. Let's be quiet, whatever. So when Ruby and I went someplace, right, and someone did a soliloquy, right, that was really bad, or got up there and sang a song that would burst the scenes of the theater, Ruby and I would stand up and go, so we were the loud ones, right? And it was such a joy. And I remember, her husband would come and pick us up, and she said, I got to go eat a sandwich and eat something. So he'd take us to a place, and he said, I'll be waiting outside with the driver, and so we'd be inside. So I'm always nervous, and well, Ruby, we have to hurry up. She said, oh, he'll wait, whatever. And so he'd come in and say to this amazing place, one of these real renowned restaurants, I came to pick up my wife, the great Ruby D, and her great friend Sonia Sanchez, and they're probably taking their time eating, but we're waiting out in the car for them. And Ruby returned and said, well, you can sit out there and keep waiting, we'll be out soon, right? And all of a sudden, we had an audience in the restaurant of people listening to this conversation. And that was the joy of being with people who were just so loving, who were just so real, and who loved each other and could do that between the 2 of them and laugh at each other, right? But also to have that kind of warmth around people where they had done a show, and we had done a show together, and we were all, in close, getting a little something to eat. And I was going home to New Rochelle with them to stay the night. And Ruby and I would stay up all night long talking, about the show and about what she wanted to do and what she had to do at some particular point. But I tell you, my dear sister, whoa. Did I answer what you wanted me to say at that point?
Far beyond.
Yeah.
You get answer and then some.
Yeah. And my dear sister, when I go into my study, I have all these great pictures around. And sometimes I just sit back and look at them. And I remember, the things that we did, the places that we went, how we were on stages together, how when Ruby was in a play, the Blacks, right? You would go and see her and Maya and all the other people who would star in these amazing plays on Broadway and off Broadway. But what I remember most of all is that how they open up to us, the younger ones, how we've tried to open up to you younger ones, how we've said, call me. I would give my number out to people, and people would say, you're giving your number out. I say, yeah, they might need to talk at some point. They might need to go. They might want to say, would you like to hear the poem that I'm doing? And I say, even though sometimes I'm busy, I would say, yes, I'd like to hear the poem that you've done, whatever. And you give support. You say, oh, send me a copy of that, and I'll look at it, and maybe I'll make a couple of little corrections, whatever, etc. But continue to write. I mean, you need that kind of energy. You need to know at some point that they are the next generation coming, and they must continue. They must continue this great generation of what I call great Black poets, right? They must continue as Sister Margaret and Sister Gwen did. Sister Gwen, would invite us to her house on Sunday in Chicago, right? And she would feed us, whatever. And then she would say, you have any new poems to read? And we had made that trip all the way, from New York City, to be there and to listen to her in her house, listen to this great woman on a Sunday who would asking Hakeem and all the Chicago poets who were there, to read something that we had written and to listen to her. And of course, we would ask her, could you read something that you've done? Or we would ask her to read one of our favorite poems of hers, whatever, etc. But it is opening up to the world, saying simply, come on, we've done this, we've had this since the very beginning, since that little girl got off that slave ship, and they looked up and she was writing poetry, whatever. Yeah, because she indeed had been trained in something. She was not just like someone who just all of a sudden showed up, in somebody's house, that she had that history and herstory, she had that gift. And so therefore, I remember when I went to the library at 145th Street when I was growing up in New York City, and one of the librarians gave me a book of Negro poetry, and lo and behold, there was at the beginning, that poem by that sister, whatever, 'twas mercy, whatever, as it begins, whatever. And because I used to, quiet as is kept, I would come into the library, getting books, right? In the afternoon when I had to come get a book to do some homework, right? And I used to go and get like these novels, right? Where there's some passionate kisses and he grabs her and they find that they're on a bed someplace, and I go in my room and read that, whatever. And so one day, this librarian said, Black librarian at 145th Street said, what's your name? I told her my name. She said, I have some books for you. She said, I bet you like poetry. And I began to look around, you're from like, well, how does she know I like poetry, right? Because every now and then I would take a poetry book out, right? Along with all those books about love, right? And kisses and falling on beds, whatever, etc. And she gave me the book of Negro poetry. Can you imagine? I went and I shared a small room in Harlem with my sister. And I remember going in that room, opening that book of poetry, and I have not lifted my head since. I remember reading that poetry aloud, right? Because finally, years later, I realized why I was reading that poetry aloud. I didn't have any gift at it or know that I was doing probably one of the best things I could be doing when I studied with a woman by the name of Louise Bogan, who's a great American poet, right? I had tried to when I got out of Hunter, and I had very little money, but I could take 2 grad classes, right? At NYU. And I had been going to these little places where they had poetry workshops. And every time I went in there, it was all men, all white men. And I would walk in with my little black self, right, and sit down and hand my registration, and silence happened. And I was in that workshop and I raised my hand, right? I was ignored. Or if I said something, there was no response. After the quiet, right? Then the teacher would say, now, someone else, he'd go on with his lecture or whatever. And after about 3 sessions like that, I left. Right. And there I was knowing that I wanted to write, my dear sister, knowing that I could feel that I had been writing, but I thought now is the time for me to see about, what happens in a workshop. Right. So what did I do? I found another workshop the next semester. Right. And I went in there and the same thing happened. There were always about 12 or 13 men, all white men, and a teacher, a white professor, male, whatever, and me sitting there. And so I would kind of like, turn around and look around, and I would raise my hand again. I would say something and the guy would just nod his head, no comment at all. Nobody commented at all. I read a poem, and I'm not talking at that time. There was no real hard hitting poetry. These little gems, that you wrote, like whatever, etc. Nobody commented on it, not one soul. It was as if that I had done something spectacular, right? And you're waiting for the applause, or you're waiting for someone to make a comment. And then the teacher, the professor, or usually a writer was teaching it. He'd say that who else has something else? Never comment. I dropped out of that class. And so that's why when I was at NYU doing the grad classes, I looked in the book where they had a record of all the classes. I looked under English, and I looked under something called creative writing. And there was this thing, a class, right? Now, it was right after what I was in, the class I was in. So I said, don't register for it, because you keep losing money that way, right? And you have very little money, right? And I said, I'll go over there. So I went in and I walked to a class. They had about 40 students there, all white males, right? Okay, Louise Bogan had walked into the class at all. And there was one white woman there. So I went and sat back. No, I didn't. I sat in the front. I said, let me sit by the door. So if if it's the same thing that happened to me before, I'll leave. I'll just get up and leave. Right. And Louise Bogan came in and she began to talk about what she was going to do. And she asked the question, how many of you want to be published? So I raised my hand. It's not, whatever. But only about maybe 3/4 the other. And she said, well, what about the rest of you? And people said, well, I just want to write. I don't have to be published. And she said, well, I know when I was writing, I wanted to be published, right? So at some point, maybe I can help some of you get published. So I stayed. No, then she asked, does anyone have any poems? Well, to ask people who write poetry, if they have a poem, they have a poem in a pocket, if it were a movie, in a bra, but no, that's not true. But I went in my little briefcase that I had, right? And I pulled out a poem. I said, Sonia, go up front, because she asked people to come up front, right? Read this poem and see what happens, right? Find out now, the first night, before you register and lose money again, right? And so I raised my hand, I went up front, and the moment I finished, hands went up. Can you imagine, in a class of 40, hands with a comment, whatever, and people commented on it. I sat there with a pen and made a couple of notes, right? And then Louise Bogan, the great Louise Bogan, commented on my poem. I said, I'm here. I'm going to register for this class. And I stayed in that class. And she taught us how to, with our notebooks, how to put, she gave us the names of all the places, magazines you should send poetry. And she said, then go. I went into the 8th Street bookstore. She sent us to the 8th Street bookstore there in the village, right? Go in and sit down and read some of the magazines, some of the journals, and see exactly what kind of poetry. She said, there's some poetry they want only what they call classical poetry, and they're not interested in the poetry that you all might be writing now here as younger people, right? But go and check it out and see. And that is how, my dear sister, I came to the 8th Street bookstore and I asked for the poetry section, and I sat down and I went through all these poems and all these magazines that were strewn on the floor, whatever. And then I went around and I saw this beautiful blue color just looking at me. And I asked for a stool to go. You see how tall, how tall I am, my dear sister, right? And I got on the stool and reached up, and it was a book that said Haiku, Japanese haiku. And I went and turned and said, do you pronounce this haiku? And he said, pronounce it haiku, right? And I sat down, and he came and got the stool someone needed, and I sat down on the floor, and started to read the haiku, the Japanese haiku, and I started to sob because I have found me someplace there in the 8th Street bookstore. I found some of the things that I happen to be talking about, the beauty of nature, but also I had extended it unknowingly to the beauty and the nature of ourselves also too, which is what the haiku poetry is also all about, right? And there I was. And I remember that, I didn't have lots of money. So I remember asking about this book, and he said, I never forget the clerk said, I said, oh, let me see if I got all the money. Maybe if you can hold the book, I can come back. He said, what do you have? And I kept my subway fare. Right. And anyway, I got that book and I began to read the haiku. And it was a glorious moment for me to know, because the haiku has traveled with me ever since. When I went to China, I think I went to China, maybe in 73, I forgot now. But China opened up the doors, right, to American writers, right, to actors. What's her name? The great Shirley MacLaine and a woman with long blonde hair. Gosh, she just did a movie with 3 other women. I'm so sorry. I won't mess with your tape here. But here we were in a place called China, and Alice Childress, the great Alice Childress, the playwright, was there, and a brother who was a newspaper person. I didn't know him, but there were 4 Blacks and the rest were all whites. And the San Francisco Mime Troupe, we were called people they were invited in there to come with the work that we were doing, the writings that we did. As I write about it now, I call us cultural ambassadors. I gave us the two words. We were actually cultural ambassadors going there to a place called China, right? Sharing the work that we did, seeing what was going on there in China. But above all, seeing another country, another land, another place, listen to people, what was happening to them. So there I landed up in a place called China and began to keep copious notes. It's never been published. I was looking at it the other night, saying that I have to figure out how I, put it in, if I try to just do a separate book with these notes that I did there in China, right? Or that I kind of, in a sense, put it in, integrated in between some of the poetry, in my memoir, or just have a section, with my visit to China at that particular point. But I tell you, I was stricken by the country. I was stricken by the beauty. And my sister, who's very my sister and I, Pat, Patricia, as this woman was walking towards me, and she looked just like my sister Patricia, because what you saw was the Native American theme that was in our family, right? My sister with that yellow skin, with that nose that was certainly Native American, with that jet black hair, right, and those eyes that were slanted, whatever, etc. My sister, who was the beauty in the house, whatever, people would come and just stare at Pat, or whatever. They would look at me and say, "Hi, how you doing, Sonia?" Whatever, etc. But they were enchanted by the beauty of my sister. My sister, who did not wallow in that beauty, but I know that she was always attracting people because she was that kind of beautiful. And I remember, I don't know if I'm going to put it in my autobiography or not, in my memoir or not, but like on a rainy day, a rainy Saturday where we couldn't go out and play. My sister would go out and play, but she would go out in dainty things and she would never get dirty. I'd go out and the same thing came back. It was ragged. My hair was all over my head. And my aunties would say, "Tis, tis, tis," to my grandmother, Mama, this girl will never be a lady. Look at her. Look at her. And Mama would say, "Let the girl be. She'd be all right. She going to I remember parts of that. She's going to stumble on gentleness one of these days." I end the piece that I did to Mama with those lines that I remember. But we would play. Pat liked to play with those little paper dolls, when you dress them, whatever. I like to play with things that were that you had to put together, whatever, like the puzzles, whatever, etc. and the sisters were there. My grandmother was the head deaconess there in the church, Amy Zion Church, right? And so they were cooking and preparing food and taking food home to cook, but popping the snap beans and whatever, etc. And one of them would say, "Patricia, isn't she beautiful?" And they all looked up and said, "Yes, she is." And they all looked up, and Pat looked up, and she was so accustomed to that, she just looked around and she took in all of that, whatever, etc. And then someone said, "And Sonia," right? And I raised my head because my sister had done that, right? And they kind of looked at me and said, "Yeah." And Mama said, they said, "Yes, she's smart, isn't she?" I mean, whatever. To go from beauty to smart is an interesting line. And Mama would say, my grandmother, we call her Mama, she said, "Yeah," she said, "she is smart. She's smart as a whip," whatever. And I remember looking at Mama smiling, whatever, etc. This woman who loved us so much, because my mother died when I was barely 2, giving birth to twins, and some years later, I will give birth to twins, period. But, there we were there. But my sister loved to play with the little paper dolls and whatever, etc. And, I just was say, okay. And, we had these little houses with these little new lights and whatever, and you put the things in. And then I finally would call off someplace and get a book, and just read while she played. But I was always running outside, and the people who played were the boys. I mean, they went outside and they conquered the world. We would come down a hill. I don't think my grandmother ever knew that on these big tricycles, at the top of the hill, we come down a hill and almost crash, right? We did that, whatever, never knew. My sister never did it. She said, "Oh, I'm going to tell Mama on you." And I said, please don't tell her. But that's what we did. We climbed trees. And one day, for no reason at all, one of the brothers says, "I'm going to be the leader today," right? And we're all running together, whatever. And it's a big fight is beginning to ensue. So I said, "I know what we'll do. We'll see who will do this." We ran in the house. We went up to our bedroom, right? And we had Pat and I share this room, twin beds, what is called double-decker beds, right? And there's a high window. And I looked out the window and I said, listen to this. I said, the person who can jump out this window, right, and slide down this tree will be the leader. Now, can you imagine that, right? And so I climb up there and I'm there, right in this space. Well, everybody ran for Mama. And they said, "Miss Driver, Miss Driver, Miss Driver, Sonia's in the window." And they came out in the backyard. And as they came out, I jumped. I kind of misjudged it a little bit. I jumped too hard and I hit the tree hard, right? And I slid down, but I was okay. And I jumped up and my knees were bleeding. And my aunties came out and said, see, mama, see, look at her, look at her, look at her. She's just not a lady. Look at her, look at her, look at her, look at her. What she does, jumping out of trees, whatever. Mama said, get some mercurochrome, right? And she washed it with water. And then she said to me, okay, we'll go change and put something else on you. And then she'd say, go out and play. I mean, Mama let me be, she let me sit in the kitchen when she was cooking that food, to give to people on Sunday. And I would get in one of the little corners, right? And Mama spoke Black English, and so I would imitate her, but I was not what do you call it? I was not being negative. I was listening to the sound of what she was saying. And it was a magical kind of sound. I would say it just as she said it, which is interesting. We didn't say it like that, Pat and I, but just as she said it. And I was singing the song in this little corner, listening to her, listening to my grandmother, who let me be, said, just let the girl be. She be all right. She gonna stumble on gentle one of these days. That's how I end one of my prose poems to her, because that's what I remember. Those aren't the words exact, but that's what I interpreted her words to mean, that she let me be. She let me just go and run wild. And you know what was great about it? I ran outside. I was the leader. But the next day we went outside and played. And nobody was the leader. That was the joy of playing, with them and being that child in Alabama, running tricycles down big hills, whatever. And also at some point going outside, running with the wind, climbing trees, and having a grandmother who would hug you and protect you, from your aunties who said, just look at her. She's all messed up. Her apron's torn, whatever. And Mama said, well, you can sew it, whatever. And she protected Pat and myself, against these high school aunties, right? Who wanted us to be, in quotes, ladylike. And my sister was indeed ladylike, right? But I ran with the wind, which was a joy, for me, for everybody. Did I speak too long?
No, I'm sitting here enjoying it and taking notes and thinking about my own childhood in Mississippi, jumping out of trees and racing.
Good.
I did all of it.
Yeah, isn't that great fun? They would sit there with little dolls, whatever, but above all, they sit in their beautiful clothes. They never got dirty. We went in the house, Pat looked just as when she came out, and I went out, hair all over my head, braids out, whatever, something torn. And my aunties would say, tis, 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 she just would never be a lady, right? And Mama said, let the girl be. Come on, honey, come on, give me a hug. Did you have a great time? Come on, eat your lunch. And then she put something else on me, and I go out and play some more. Thank God for grandmothers, whatever, right? My mother was not there, right? Just my aunties, who were young ladies in high school, right? And their whole idea is that, you're supposed to not run with the wind. But isn't it great, my dear sister, when you can run with the wind, then you can hear the words in the wind, and you can hear the poetry in the wind, and you can at some point start grabbing them. And I started to write. Mama told them, teach this girl how to write. The alphabet, whatever, because I was always asking, read this, read that. And she'd say again, teach this girl how to read. So at 4, I was reading these little books, whatever. So when my sister went to school at 6, right, in Alabama, she disappeared one day. People came and got her. And I said to Mama, where's Pat? Where's Pat going? They said, oh, she's going to school. She's going to be in first grade. They said, and I don't know if this is true or not, that I had a tantrum, or I cried. And since my father was a school teacher and he knew the principal at Tuggle Elementary School in Birmingham, right? He called and said, let Sonia come. She's crying, she's having a fit because her sister is leaving her. Let her come and just sit in. They said, oh, she'll come and sit and just watch. Well, at the end of the year, I had done the work, right? And lo and behold, we go to school, and my sister's not with me. They said she's in another room. And the principal called my father and said, look, Wilson, we're going to let her go on with her sister. She's doing the work, they say, so let her go on. It was a joy for me because I loved school. I love reading. I love what the teacher was saying. I mean, I was entranced,
Mm.
always have been entranced by words, the words, whatever. And I remember I used to listen to my teacher talk, and I would repeat the words, also. It was a joy to be there with teachers who really cared. Because if you didn't get something, if you didn't get a math problem, you had to eat your lunch inside, right? And then she would go over it again with you until you got it. And then she sent extra homework because she lived right in your neighborhood. And she'd knock on the door and tell Mama, Sonia has a little homework to do, make sure she does it, blah, 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 blah. And Mama did, and my aunties did also too. But that was the joy of being in a place called Alabama. That was the joy of having teachers who cared for you, because these teachers came to New York, came to Philadelphia, came to Washington, D.C. To do graduate work. They all had MAs. In education, whatever. So these people knew what they were doing, what they were teaching us. So we moved to New York City. The school says they were going to put me and my sister back, especially me, because I was too young to be in the class that they said I was, in. And that was the first time I ever saw my father speak up against a white man, because he was from the South. He was a Southern Black man. And he would go to the high school, the elementary school, and say to the principal, I know I'm a school teacher. I taught, a school in Birmingham, Alabama, but they thought, everybody was backwards down there. He said, and Sonia Sonia, he called me. Well, Sonia should be in this class because she does the work also. And they gave both of us a test. And lo and behold, we were in these, classes that were, the so-called good classes, whatever. And that was the first time I heard my father speak up to a white man in a place called New York City, right? Because he was protecting his daughters, making sure that we got that education. Because education is so important to so many Blacks in America, and he wanted to make sure that we got that education, or the great education that we had continued. Right? It was much better, by the way, in Birmingham than it was in Harlem, in New York City. Right?
Mm-hmm. You have to meet our little ones. One day. We have two daughters, Shokoran. So
how old are they?
They are 5 and 9.
Oh, how wonderful. Oh, wow.
I will send pictures of them with the picture from when my okay, there you go.
I was when I was in China, we were there for 4 weeks, so we had 2 more weeks to go. And we were in at that time Beijing, and I said I hadn't spoken to them, so I got on the telephone and I called them, and I said to them, we're going to remember the pictures we saw. We're going to climb the Great Wall of China today, and whatever. And they were saying, "Did you get my sword? Did you get my hat? Did you get my jacket?" And I lied and said, "Yes, I had." We hadn't had time to shop, but on the way there, and on the way back from climbing the Great Wall of China, I said, I wrote a haiku to Mungu Marani from Beijing. I said, "Let me wear the day well, so when it reaches you, you will enjoy it." And that evening, I read my poetry at the university there, Beijing, and I ended with that poem. I said, the only poem I've written so far, since we've had so much traveling, and movements, I said, is this poem. I read it, and I said, and one of the officials said, Professor Sanchez, if we here in the East learn how to wear our days well, by the time you get the day in the West, perhaps we will have peace. Understand the power and beauty of that haiku. Understand the power and beauty of poetry, that this official in uniform, this soldier stood up and said, Professor Sanchez, Dr. Sanchez, if we here in China, Beijing, learn how to wear our days well, perhaps by the time you get it in the West, we will have peace. And that is why I write the haiku, because it is a peaceful form, that I can write the haiku and show the beauty, that is not only in nature, but the beauty in ourselves. The nature of ourselves is always, always what I call soaked in beauty, the beauty of the land, the beauty of our eyes and our spouse, the beauty of the people, the beauty of Black people and all people at some particular point as we walk on this land. And I know because of the poetry and having been a professor for 45 years, having listened to you younger people, what you write, how you move on this earth, you're moving this earth. And I say at the same time, make sure that you stay creative, keep writing, keep painting, keep drawing, keep getting on the stages and bringing us the plays that we need to hear that will keep us going and keep us alive and keep us holy and keep us always united with each other. Thank you so much for having me on this program. It is such a joy to see you and to be with my family today also.
That's right. This has been my joy. Thank you for giving us your morning and battling with the weather that we're all battling with, from going from hot to cold, and it's just messing with our voices and sinuses, right, and that sort of thing.
Right.